Imagine a world where fear no longer has power over you, where every thought, every breath, every heartbeat is anchored in a single truth. God is here, now, with you. The end of fear. How to remember God in every moment is not just a text. It is a portal, a living guide to the deepest inner freedom you can experience. Emmet Fox, one of the great spiritual visionaries of the 20th century, offers in these pages a luminous, simple, and powerful revelation. Fear disappears when we remember who we are and to whom we belong. Here you will find no dogma, only direction, no empty promises, but practical tools to transform your mind and open your soul. As you listen to these words, you will feel something awaken within you, a strength, a peace, a certainty that needs no explanation. This is the journey back to the sacred, the return to the now, the return to God. Breathe, listen, and remember, because fear only rules where forgetfulness lives. And you came to remember. Fear is a shadow, an illusion born of separation, fed by ignorance and sustained by the false belief that we are alone in an uncertain universe. Fear is not a spiritual reality, it is a mental projection, and like every projection of the human mind uprooted from God, it can be dissolved by the light of knowledge. No one has come into this world to live in fear. No one was created to be afraid. You were formed by eternal love, and in that love there is no fear. When fear appears, it is not because God has sent it. It is because your thinking, whether for a moment or an entire lifetime, has forgotten its divine origin. Fear is forgetfulness, faith is remembrance, fear is darkness, faith is vision. There is no fear in the kingdom of heaven, and if fear exists within you, it is because your thoughts have wandered far from that kingdom, which is not outside you, not in the stars, not in the beyond. It is here. Now, in the deep stillness of your own being, the purpose of this book is not to fight fear, because what is fought becomes stronger. Its purpose is to dissolve it, and fear dissolves with the only thing that truly has power: truth. The truth is that you have never been alone, that there is no real danger to the soul, that the life that created you sustains you, and that everything you fear, whether poverty, illness, abandonment, failure, or death, is simply a thought lacking spiritual foundation. Fear does not come from God, and anything that does not come from God has no power. It only has the power you give it by believing in it. But what has been learned can be unlearned, and what has been projected from a fearful mind can be replaced with a vision born of living consciousness. Fear is an energy that occupies space in your awareness, and as long as that space is filled with worry, with painful anticipation, with false images and the voices of the world, spirit cannot speak clearly. That's why the first thing we must do is evict fear from its illusory throne, not with violence, but with understanding. Not with shouting, but with inner silence. Not with superficial denial, but with deep acceptance that you are truly a child of God, and the child of God cannot fear. Fear is contagious, but so is confidence. And when a soul awakens to its inner power, to its unity with the eternal, it radiates certainty, dispels darkness, and renews others. This book is meant to do that with you. It will not give you magic formulas. It will remind you of what you already know deep within, that you are safe, that you are guided, that you are loved, and that everything you ever feared will dissolve like mist before the sun when you look truth in the eye and allow it to take its place in your mind. Because where God dwells, fear cannot exist. And when you dwell in God, everything in your life begins to align with peace, with provision, with health, with joy that nothing and no one can take from you. So let us go beyond fear, not to deny it, but to transcend it, not to numb it, but to understand its falsehood. And once you understand, you'll see it never had roots, only shadows. And a shadow exists only where the light has been denied. Today we ignite that light, and you will never fear again. The End of Fear, How to Remember God at All Times, by Emmet Fox. We've noticed that over 80% of visitors to our channel are not subscribed. You can support this project by pressing the subscribe button and liking the video. Thank you for inspiring us to keep creating more and better content for you. Are you ready to transform your life? Chapter 1. The Spiritual Origin of Fear. How it is born in the mind separated from God. All fear, no matter how sophisticated it may seem, is born from a single root, the belief in separation from God. That is the original cause, not external danger, not painful experience, not past trauma. Fear arises when the soul forgets that it is united with the source of all good and begins to imagine itself alone, vulnerable, and abandoned in an uncertain universe. And that belief, because it is nothing more than that, a belief, activates a shell of erroneous thoughts, dense emotions, defensive attitudes, and unbalanced decisions that form the battlefield of the human mind. The soul was not created with fear. It was created in love, by love, and for love, and love does not fear. But when thought slips away from the awareness of unity, when it clings to the error of separation, the great imposter appears, the ego, and with it, its most effective tool, fear. The ego, that fabricated image that usurps the place of the true self, lives on fear. It cannot survive without it, because it knows that if the soul were to fully remember its origin, if it were to rest once again in the certainty that God and I are one, then the ego would be left without function. So it creates its fictions, the fear of loss, the fear of rejection, the fear of death, the fear of lack, the fear of not being. All of them are born from the same error, having forgotten who you are. There is no deeper fear than that of feeling separated from God, and although it is not always named as such, that is the tremor behind every tremor. That is the silent cry behind every anxiety, every insecurity, every mental emptiness. When the mind stops looking upward, it projects outward, and in that moment, it ceases to receive guidance from spirit and begins to depend on the senses, on statistics, on the news, on others' opinions, on the past and the future, forgetting that only the present is real and only God is truth. Fear is not proof that something is wrong in the world. It is a sign that something is out of alignment in the mind. And correcting it does not require changing the circumstances. It requires remembering the source, returning to the center, returning home. That's why fear cannot be conquered by willpower. It cannot be tamed through superficial denial. It cannot be silenced by empty phrases. It is dissolved by light. And that light is born when you recognize that you have never been separate, that you have never been unprotected, that you have never been abandoned. God has not gone anywhere. What has happened is that your attention has shifted. Your focus has become unfocused. Your thoughts have wandered into the world of forms and forgotten the world of causes, and in that forgetting fear finds its home. But a single instant of true remembrance, a single act of alignment with presence, is enough for fear to begin to fade. Where are you placing your trust? In your bank account, in your physical health, in your image before others, in your personal effort? If so, fear will have fertile ground, because all of that is fleeting, all of it changes, all of it is a reflection, and the soul cannot find rest in what changes. Only in God is there certainty, only in God is there rest, only in God does fear have no place. The original error was not sin. The original error was believing that you were alone, and from there, fear was born. But that error can be corrected with every thought that returns to the center, with every prayer that rises from the soul, with every act of faith that declares, I am no longer afraid because I know I am not alone. Presence guides me, love sustains me, the divine mind thinks with me, and where God is, there is no room for fear. Fear is not punishment, it is a messenger. It comes to show you that you have forgotten your unity with the all, and once you hear that message, you can return it to silence because you no longer need it. Fear feeds on forgetting. Peace feeds on remembering. And your only task is to remember, again and again, that you are one with the eternal principle of good. And from there, everything changes. Because when the soul knows it lives within love, it no longer needs to fear the world, because the world ceases to be an enemy and begins to be a reflection. Chapter 2. The Great Illusion, Why Fear is Inverted Faith. Every thought is energy in motion. Every sustained thought is a seed crying out for form, and just as faith, when directed toward God, builds invisible bridges to the good, the beautiful, and the true, fear is that same energy projected in the opposite direction, toward the illusion of loss, danger, and abandonment. At its deepest core, fear is misplaced faith. It is inverted faith. The mind was designed to trust. Trust is its natural state. But when it does not trust in God, it trusts in error. When it does not rest upon truth, it rests upon appearances. And then what was created to be a vehicle of expansion becomes a stage for conflict. You have faith even when you fear. Faith that things will go wrong. Faith that money won't be enough. Faith that the diagnosis will be confirmed. Faith that love will fail. That too is faith, even if unconscious. It is the great illusion, the reversal of the soul's natural law. Faith, when directed toward the shadow, when fed by suspicion, negative scenarios, and unholy prophecies, becomes a generator of fear. And that fear, when deeply felt, attracts precisely what was feared. Not because the universe is cruel, but because the law is obedient. The law responds to vibration, and fear, being an intense vibration, summons that which matches its frequency. That is why Job said, "What I feared has come upon me." Not as punishment, but as the manifestation of faith placed in the wrong direction. Fear creates because you create, and you create because you carry within you the power of God. But that power must be used consciously. Many pray asking for deliverance, but they pray from anxiety, from doubt, from fear disguised as devotion, and they do not receive, not because God withholds, but because the law responds to the true content of the prayer, not merely its words. The universe does not listen to what you say with your mouth, but to what you hold in your heart. And if there is fear in the heart, the word contradicts itself, the affirmation weakens, the prayer becomes an echo. To reverse this inversion, to place faith back in its rightful place, you don't need more strength, you need more clarity. You need to see with the eyes of the soul that fear is not reality, but a temporary creation of a disconnected mind. And by redirecting your attention, withdrawing energy from the negative, refusing to continue feeding with your thought what you do not want, you are already beginning to undo fear. Faith is a flame, fear is a shadow. But no shadow resists the light, and no fear survives when true faith is lit. Do not fear fear, observe it and acknowledge it, and then remind yourself that it is not true. Remind yourself it is a fabricated image, an echo of the past, a projection of a future that has not happened, and in the presence of God never has to happen. Begin to use your creative power in service of the good. Visualize what you desire, not what you fear. Declare what is eternal, not what is passing. Feel that you are already safe, already provided for, already guided. And that certainty, even if it feels faint at first, will begin to dissolve the mental clouds until your mind regains its original state of peace. You were created to trust, and when you trust, the soul opens. And when the soul opens, the good enters, and when the good enters, fear retreats, because fear is not a force, it is the absence of alignment. And when you align your faith with God, when you declare that love is your path, when you choose the higher thought over the conditioned thought, you are once again reversing the direction of your energy. Fear stops growing when you stop feeding it, and it loses its power when you see it for what it is. Faith turned upside down, an act of creation without God, an invitation to return home. And you can return at any moment. All it takes is to say in the silence of the soul, "Father, I trust, and I withdraw my faith from the false and place it in you. I know I am safe, and so now I rest." And that rest is the beginning of the end of fear, and the beginning of a free life. Chapter 3. The Presence that Dissolves Fear. Discovering God as inner certainty. Fear is not overcome by fighting it. It is not eradicated by pushing it away or by covering it with empty words. Fear is not eliminated through effort. It is dissolved through presence. And that presence is none other than God in you, alive, intimate, real. Not as a religious concept, not as a distant figure, not as an abstract energy, but as an inner certainty, as an experience that transforms your state of consciousness from the root. Where the presence of God is truly felt, fear cannot coexist. Not because it is destroyed, but because it becomes unnecessary. A mind that knows it is accompanied does not imagine danger. A soul that rests in unity does not anticipate threats. A being that recognizes God as its foundation does not live in alertness, but in trust. Fear is a sign that your mind has stepped out of presence, that it has shifted toward the future with anxiety or toward the past with guilt. But God is not in the past nor in the future. God is here, God is now, and if you are also here and now, then there is no fear, there is peace. Presence is not found in noise, and it does not arise in the agitation of the mind. It comes when you grow quiet, when you stop asking, stop struggling, stop controlling, when you surrender with humility and open with faith. And in that inner silence where there is no name or form, certainty appears, God is, and that is enough. You do not need to have all the answers if you have presence. You do not need to see the whole path if you feel the hand that guides you. You do not need external guarantees when your soul is rooted in truth. And that truth is this: you have never been alone, and you have never been abandoned. God has been in you, with you, and as you, as in every moment, even if you didn't know it. Spiritual practice is not the accumulation of ideas. It is awakening to what has always been. It is allowing the presence to once again take the throne of your heart. It is making inner space so that God is not a memory, but a living force, active and real. When you feel that presence, even for a moment, everything changes, not the world, but your perception of the world. And that change transforms everything. What once seemed like a threat becomes part of the plan. What once caused pain now teaches. What once inspired fear now reveals understanding, because presence brings clarity. And where there is clarity, there is no fear. Practice returning to presence. Close your eyes, breathe, and let go, and say deep within, "Here I am, and you are with me, and I do not fear. You are my refuge, my guide, my truth." Do not seek an intense emotional experience. Sometimes presence reveals itself as a gentle peace, as a sigh that lightens the soul, as a moment when worry disappears. That moment is worth more than 1,000 thoughts, because in it you remembered your divine nature, and that alone is enough to begin healing. Fear is forgetfulness. Presence is the memory of the spirit, and the more you practice it, the more constant it becomes, until one day, without effort, you discover that you live from it, that you speak from it, that you decide from it, that it has become your natural state, and then it doesn't matter what happens outside. The storm may roar, but you are at the center of the hurricane, that silent, unshakable place where only God dwells. You don't need to scream for him to come, you only need to return. God has not left, you stepped away, and today you can return. Return to the now. Return within, return to the truth. And once you feel that presence as inner certainty, not as an idea but as a palpable reality, you will see how fear dissolves without a fight, how darkness retreats without conflict, how the soul breathes again without effort. Because light does not fight the shadow, it simply shines. And where it shines, there is no shadow left to hold. Such is God in you. Such is the presence that heals all. Such is the truth that dissolves all fear. For where God is, there is nothing left to fear. Chapter 4. The Power of Thought. What the soul fears, it creates. There is no greater shaping force in your life than your own thought. It is not destiny that writes your days, nor the whims of chance, nor external circumstances. It is your mind held steadily in one direction that attracts, allows, and repels. And when that mind is tinged with fear, it becomes a silent factory of shadows. Because the soul, when afraid, not only retreats, it also projects. And what it projects with enough intensity, sooner or later, becomes experience. Such is the delicate and powerful law of thought. It does not pause to judge whether what you think is desirable or not. The mind creates by correspondence, not by desire. It creates what you hold, not what you long for. It creates what vibrates most strongly in you, even if your words say otherwise. That is why fear is a negative prayer. It is a wordless affirmation, an internal declaration that says, "This might happen, and I believe it has power over me." And that declaration, sustained day after day, with emotion, with involuntary visualization, with expectation, takes form. Not because life wants to punish you, but because you gave it permission. The soul that constantly fears is training its imagination to create what it does not want. And that imagination, combined with emotion, becomes spiritual cause. And like every cause, it produces effect. This is not to make you feel guilty. It is to awaken you, because the power you use today to fear is the same power you can use to create what is good, uplifting, and beautiful. You don't need more power. You need a change of direction. Your mind is a paintbrush and your world the canvas. Each thought is a brushstroke, and if you paint from fear, the landscape will reflect chaos, lack, and threat. But if you paint from clarity, from the vision of the divine in you and in everything, the picture changes. Not because the world changes, but because you do. And the world responds. Thought is not something volatile. It is subtle, vibrant, living substance. It is a cause that acts in the invisible, but molds the visible. If you fear not having, you are declaring lack. If you fear illness, you are declaring disconnection. If you fear loss, you are declaring fragility. And that declaration, even if not spoken aloud, is read by the law as a command. Because the law does not respond to your words. It responds to your vibration. Now the same applies to clarity. When you think from truth, when you imagine good, when you feel peace as you think about the future, when you visualize from love and not from fear, your thought becomes a channel for God. And through that channel flow provision, healing, guidance, and solutions. Thought doesn't need to be perfect. It only needs to be consistent with your faith. And that consistency is achieved by training the mind, by watching its habits, by choosing again and again to think with God, not against Him. You are not at the mercy of your thoughts. You generate them, you sustain them, and you can choose new ones, and thoughts of life, not death. Thoughts of unity, not separation. Thoughts of trust, not fear. Every time fear arises, do not reject it with violence. Observe it and say, this too is a creation of my mind. I can choose again. I can think with God, and I can declare the opposite. And when you declare the opposite, you do it not from desire, but from authority. Not from whim, but from the understanding that your soul creates according to what it sustains. Remember this, what you sustain manifests. What you repeat becomes imprinted. What you feel with intensity becomes form. So do not feed the shadow, and do not imagine what you do not want. Do not forecast what you don't wish to live. Train your mind to be a channel of the eternal, an instrument of good, an open space for God to think in you and with you. Say with conviction, my thoughts are seeds of light. I only sow ideas of love, truth, and provision. And what you sow in the invisible appears in the visible, as blessing, because this is the law, and this is your soul, and this is the power you carry. Not to fear, but to create. Chapter 5. Replace and transform. Do not fight fear, replace it with truth. Fear cannot be overcome by fighting it. The more you confront it, the more you feed it. The more you name it, the more space you give it. And the more you try to forcibly uproot it, the deeper it takes root. Because fear is not an entity with a will of its own. It is an absence of light, of clarity, of certainty. Fear is shadow, and shadow can only exist where the light has not been turned on. If this is so, then the true spiritual practice in the face of fear is not to battle it, but to replace it. It's not about defeating fear, but about denying it residence in your consciousness, because now you choose to think with God. You are not called to be a warrior against your thoughts. You are called to be a sower of true ideas. The mind cannot remain empty. It is always occupied by something. And if you don't fill it, the world will, and the past will, the news will, the inherited voices, the distorted memories, they will. That's why the mind must be trained, not repressed, guided, not violated. Do not stop to wrestle with fear. Do something wiser. Introduce the truth. And truth, like light, does not need to shout. It simply enters, and upon entering it eliminates what does not belong. A fearful thought can be substituted with a spiritual affirmation. A thought of loss can be replaced by an image of abundance. A thought of death can be replaced by a declaration of life. And this act of replacement is not superficial denial, it is conscious alignment. Just as you do not turn on the light to fight darkness, but to make it disappear, in the same way, you do not need to defeat fear. You need to shine. Shine with thoughts of love. Shine with words of faith. Shine with the presence of someone who knows they are not alone. Shine with the certainty that there is a higher mind that guides you, protects you, sustains you. And when that inner light is turned on, fear finds no fertile ground, because you have replaced it and transformed it. Yes, this requires practice, not because the principle is difficult, but because you have been used to reacting rather than choosing. And now you choose, with every thought, with every word, with every image you allow into your mind. The great tool of this transformation is spiritual affirmation, not as magic, but as a reminder from the soul. When you feel fear, don't say, I shouldn't be afraid, and that reinforces it. Instead, say, God is here, I am one with the good. Nothing can threaten the child of God, only the real has power, and the real is truth, not my fear. And repeat it, not to convince God, but to convince yourself, so that the mind lets go of its old programming and embraces a new frequency, one that is at peace, not from ignorance, but from connection with the eternal. Do not try to remove each weed one by one. Plant light, plant trust, and the mental garden will be completely renewed. Fear persists because you fed it with attention, but now that attention returns to its origin, to the kingdom, to the spirit, and to the truth. And from that new gaze, fear loses its form. Because its form was never solid, it was borrowed from your belief. And when you withdraw it, fear dissolves like smoke, and this is the path. Do not fight, replace, do not repress, transform, and do not flee. Remember that love is in you like a lit torch, waiting for you to raise it above your old thoughts, so it may illuminate every corner. And where there once was fear, there is now only certainty, only joy, only the peace of one who knows that the kingdom of God is not something to come. It has arrived, because you have returned to the truth. Chapter 6, Practical Faith. Live as if God's protection is already at work. True faith is not an abstract ideal, nor an emotion that flares up only in moments of inspiration. Faith is a living spiritual law, and like every law, it needs to be applied, embodied, and upheld in every act of daily life. It's not enough to believe in God. You have to live as if God were real. It's not enough to affirm His protection. You have to behave like someone who is already protected. This is practical faith, living in alignment with the truth even when there's no external evidence. It's walking as if you've already received, thinking as if you're already supported, choosing as if you're already guided. And when you live this way, not by denying facts but by affirming the principle, fear has no ground to stand on. Because fear feeds on doubt, and doubt is the crack through which anxiety enters. But faith, when it becomes action, decision, and presence, seals that crack and creates a state of certainty that transforms the world. Most people wait to feel safe before acting in faith, but on the spiritual path, it works the other way around. You act in faith and then safety appears, because the soul is not trained through passive thoughts but through experiences that reinforce trust. Every time you choose not to give in to fear, even when you feel it, every time you move forward without visible guarantees, every time you bless what appears to be adversity, every time you say, God is taking care of me now, even when your mind screams otherwise, you're anchoring yourself in true faith. You're telling the universe, I trust more in what I don't see than in what seems to be. And that choice does not go unnoticed. The law receives it as a vibrational signal and responds with order, with guidance, with provision. Practical faith is not stubbornness. It's not ignoring outer reality. It's giving priority to spiritual truth over appearances. It's knowing that what is seen changes, but what is remains. And what is God. And God protects you not because you ask, but because it is His nature. You don't have to beg for protection. You have to remember it, accept it, embody it. You have to live knowing that you are under the law of good, that spirit surrounds you, that nothing real can harm you, because what is real is made of the eternal, and you are part of the eternal. Are you afraid something might happen? Then ask yourself, how would I act if I knew that God is already working in my favor? And act that way, walk that way, breathe that way, and that coherence will open the way. Faith is not emotional exaltation. It is deep peace. It is knowing without proof. It is resting without explanation. It is the feeling of being held when everything around you seems to say the opposite. And when you reach that point, the world can no longer take anything from you, because your security no longer depends on the world. It depends on God in you. And God does not fail. God is never late. God does not make mistakes. God does not abandon. Declare within yourself, I act as one already protected. I think as one already guided. I live as one already blessed. Because it is so. Because God is already here. And when that declaration stops being mere words and becomes attitude, movement, a silent decision, fear simply withdraws, because it no longer has anywhere to anchor itself. And so, step by step, without needing great external miracles, your life becomes a testimony that faith is not illusion, but soul science, and a science that when applied brings sure results. Peace, provision, healing, clarity. And it all begins with a single decision, to live as if you were already in God's hands, because in truth you always have been. Chapter 7, Perfect Love, the divine antidote that casts out all fear. Fear cannot dwell where love has made its home. This is not a metaphor. It is not a spiritual symbol. It is a law as certain as gravity, as precise as the sunrise. In love there is no fear, but perfect love casts out fear. This phrase recorded in Scripture is not poetry. It is an exact spiritual formula. Because fear is the direct consequence of disconnection from love, not human love, fluctuating and conditional, but absolute love, which is God Himself. That love cannot be earned, bought, or achieved. It is remembered. It is within you now as it was from the beginning, and it was your starting point, and it is your destination. And only the forgetting of that love has allowed fear to become a regular guest in your consciousness. Where there is fear, love has been denied. And where love is restored, fear dissolves, and there is no battle, there is no violence. Because love does not need to fight. Love does not combat. It transforms. It does not argue. It embraces. It does not react. It understands. When you are afraid, it is not because danger is real. It is because, even for a moment, you have forgotten that you are held, surrounded, protected by a force that knows you better than you know yourself. And that force is not outside you nor above you. It is within you, and it is love. And that love is God. To live in that love is not a utopia. It is the soul's original state of being. It is a return to your natural state, to the silent home where nothing is lacking, nothing threatens, and nothing is lost. Fear makes you shrink. Love expands you. Fear makes you tense. Love makes you free. Fear isolates you. Love unites you. And in that union, even the idea of danger loses all meaning. Because if you are one with God, and God is all, what could harm you? What could separate you? What could make you fear? Fear cannot withstand perfect love, because love has no weak points. It is wholeness. And where there is wholeness, there is no lack. And where there is no lack, there is no threat. And where there is no threat, the soul rests. But this love must not remain just an idea. It must become an experience. And to make it so, you must invoke it, remember it, live it. It is not enough to say, God loves me. You must act like someone who knows they are loved. You must look at others as extensions of that love. You must think thoughts born of love, and abandon the ones born of fear, and then something happens, not outside but within, a new peace, a deep rest, a clarity that needs no explanation, the living presence of love, as an invisible shield, as a refuge, and as a fire that lights without burning. When love is in you, you don't need to chase every fear, or put out every fire. You only need to turn on the light, and that light is love remembered. If you are feeling fear today, don't fight it. Love more, love yourself more, bless more, remember more. Repeat with your soul, I dwell in the love of God, and that love surrounds me, guides me, defends me. In love there is no space for fear, because love is perfect, and the perfect love, which is God in me, casts out all fear. Now I rest, and now I trust, now I love. And fear has no name in my consciousness. This is not just an affirmation, it is a revelation. And if you hold it with an open heart, you will feel how what once threatened you loses its power, how what once hurt you becomes wisdom, and how what once frightened you becomes your teacher. Until there is nothing left to fear, because only love remains. And love is God, and God is you in your truest form. Chapter 8. The Fear of the Future, How to Return to the Now and Reclaim Spiritual Power. The fear of the future is perhaps the most common and paralyzing of all fears. It has no defined face or precise shape, but it creeps into the mind like a threat that doesn't yet exist, and yet feels as though it were already real. It whispers, what if you lose? What if you get sick? What if everything you rely on today fails you? And even if the present is in order, the soul that fears tomorrow cannot rest. The future, by definition, does not exist. It is a mental construct, a projected image, a space where the grace of God has not yet arrived, because grace only operates in the aura of the now. And when your mind constantly projects itself forward, away from the present moment, it ceases to be a channel of spiritual power and becomes a generator of anxiety. This is the great error of the fearful mind, trying to live in a time that hasn't arrived. In doing so, it abandons the only place where God truly acts, the now. You cannot find peace in the future because the future is a mirage. Only in the present instant can the security of the spirit be revealed, the silent guidance, the certainty that everything is held within the eternal now. The fear of the future is, in truth, the fear of being without God in a time that has not yet come. It is believing that when that moment arrives, you won't be supported. Imagining a scenario in which you'll be alone, unprotected, without answers. But that is a false assumption, because God is already in your tomorrow, and when you get there, He will be with you just as He always has been. Your task is not to solve what is to come, but to be fully present here, because in the now you have access to all the spiritual power that exists, and that power is enough. It always has been, and the future does not need to be predicted. It needs to be surrendered. When you place the time ahead into the hands of the divine mind, when you declare from the depths, "I don't know, but God knows," something shifts within you. The inflation of fear deflates, the noise ceases, and trust settles in. And that trust doesn't depend on everything turning out as you hope, but on knowing that, whatever happens, good will be revealed, and you will be guided step by step, and you will never lack what is essential. Fear of the future is also a form of unconscious arrogance. It is believing that you must foresee everything, control everything, anticipate everything, as if the universe depended on your limited understanding. But the humble soul says, "I don't know what will come, but I know it will come with purpose, and I know I will be ready because I am not alone." This is the spiritual practice. Not living from the calendar, but from awareness. Not dwelling in mental time, but in the sacred space of the hour. In the now, there is no lack. In the now, there is no threat. In the now, there is only presence. And that presence is God. And where God is, the soul breathes without fear. When fear of the future visits you, do not follow it. Do not feed it. Do not give it images or scenarios or arguments. Simply return. Return to the body, to the breath, to the instant, and repeat in silence, "Now I am safe. Now I am supported, and now I am guided. Tomorrow belongs to God, and I belong to Him." This is not denial, it is choice. It is not escapism, it is realignment. And from that now, where nothing is lacking, where everything is held, you reclaim what fear had taken from you, the spiritual power of trust, the certainty that the universe is not against you, and the joy of knowing that the best has not yet happened. But when it does, it will find you strong, conscious, awake, and at peace. Because living without fear of the future is not living without awareness of tomorrow. It is living with full awareness that no matter what comes, God will be enough, and so will you. Chapter 9. Fear of failure, fear of success. Two forms of the same lie. Fear is a beast. It disguises itself as caution, camouflages itself as realism, and presents itself with logical arguments, often even spiritual ones. But it remains fear. And one of its most common disguises is this paradox: the fear of failure and the fear of success, two apparent opposites, but in reality, two faces of the same lie, the belief that you are separate from God and therefore responsible and guilty for the outcome. The fear of failure says, "What if I don't succeed? What if I make a mistake? What if I expose myself and fall?" While the fear of success whispers, "What if I succeed and can't sustain it? What if people expect too much from me? What if shining leaves me alone, demands more from me, pulls me away from others?" Both paralyze you. Both distance you from your purpose. Both are rooted in the same false idea that you are the origin and the sustainer of your own life. But that is the root of fear, to believe that you must do it all by yourself, to believe that if you fail, you are unworthy, and that if you succeed, you must pay a price. To believe that life is an exam in which you can fail. But life, when seen from spiritual consciousness, is a stage of revelation, not of condemnation. You are not here to prove your worth. You are here to express God, and God does not fail. God does not fear. God does not contradict Himself. When you fear failure, you forget that step by step, even what seems like a mistake is contained within a greater purpose. And when you fear success, you forget that the good does not come to punish you, but to manifest through you as a channel. The problem is not what you fear. It is that you have confused yourself with the small self and forgotten your true self. The fear of failure is based on shame, and shame comes from not knowing who you are. But when you remember that you are a divine expression, a holy idea in the mind of God, failure stops being a threat. It becomes, at most, a redirection. The fear of success is based on guilt, guilt for standing out, for prospering, for receiving, as if there was something immoral in expanding. But that too is false, because you take nothing that hasn't been given to you, and what is given to you is not for your vain glory, but for your service, for the welfare of your soul, to glorify the giver through the loving use of the gifts. When you live in the consciousness of unity, neither failure diminishes you, nor success inflates you. Both lose their emotional charge because you no longer depend on the result. You depend on God, and that holy dependence is the only true freedom. Do not fear falling, because if you fall, the law will teach you. Do not fear ascending, because if you ascend, the Spirit will sustain you. The only danger is staying still because of fear, giving up your calling because of insecurity, refusing to shine because of fear of judgment. And that, more than an error, is a betrayal of the light that lives in you. The fear of failure says you are not enough. The fear of success says you are too much. But the truth says you are exactly what the moment needs because God has prepared you for this day, and everything that comes will be for your good. Practice letting go of the worry about results. Do what you have come to do. Do it with love, with faith, with humility, and leave the outcome in the hands of the one who sees farther than you. That is true spiritual obedience, not passive submission, but active surrender in trust. Declare with your being, I do not fear failure because I am guided. I do not fear success because I am sustained. I do not walk alone. What I must be, I already am. What I must do will be shown to me, and what must come will find me ready because I live in the truth, and the truth makes me free. This is how both fears dissolve, not with force but with vision, not with effort but with surrender. Because once you remember who created you and why you are here, all fear loses its foundation, and the soul walks not behind success nor fleeing from failure, but forward with steady steps in the light. Chapter 10. The false security of the world, because only in God is true trust. The world offers many forms of security: contracts, insurance, bank accounts, professional titles, relationships, reputation, possessions, routines, and all of these may seem firm, stable, reliable. But just one move, a shift in the market, an unexpected illness, a poorly spoken word, a sudden loss, and everything that seemed so solid begins to wobble, crack, and fall apart. Why? Because nothing that has been built outside of God can offer true trust. The security that the world promises is always conditional, always subject to what happens, always dependent on external factors. It always keeps you alert, on guard, defensive. Because although it appears to protect you, deep down it reminds you that everything can change. The only trust that cannot be shaken is the one built on the eternal, and only the eternal is God. Everything else is a symbol, a vehicle, a reflection, and what is a reflection has no light of its own. It depends on its source. When you place your faith in the visible, you become a slave to its fragility. But when you align with the invisible, with the principle, with the truth that does not change, then the soul is liberated, because it no longer needs to control the world. It only needs to remember its source. This does not mean rejecting the material. It is not about despising the body, money, work, or relationships. It is about not worshipping them, not making them your God, not handing over your peace to what may disappear tomorrow. Jesus said, "Do not lay up treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up treasures in heaven." This is not just a spiritual metaphor. It is a precise instruction about where you should place your foundation. Heaven is not a place, it is a state of consciousness. And when your consciousness rests in God, the external world, although it changes, can no longer collapse you. The soul that is anchored in the eternal does not fear losses, because it knows it can never lose what is essential. What comes and goes is part of the play of form, but the essence remains, and you are that essence, immutable, untouchable, sustained. False security tells you if you do this, if you achieve that, if you keep everything under control, then you'll be fine. But true trust whispers, even if everything changes, even if you don't understand, even if you can't see it, God is there, and where God is, all is well. Practicing this trust is not passivity, it is active rest. It is making decisions from peace, not from fear. It is acting from faith, not from despair. It is knowing that you can walk on water, not because the waters are firm, but because your gaze is fixed on the Spirit. False security demands guarantees. True trust rests in the presence. It does not need explanations because it has proven, at least once, that when everything seemed lost, an invisible force held, gave, provided, and that is enough. Say with yourself, I do not trust in my bank account, nor in my agenda, nor in my merits. I trust in God because He is the only rock. Everything else can move, but my soul rests in the truth. And then you will be able to walk through instability without losing your peace. You will see old structures crumble without trembling, because you no longer depend on them. You depend on the eternal, and the eternal never fails. Security is not in what you possess, it is in what you know. And what you must know is this: you are one with the principle of good, and that principle sustains you, guides you, protects you, and knows you, even when you don't understand, even when you can't see it, even when the world says the opposite. Everything you build with that certainty will be solid, not because it cannot change, but because you no longer fear change. And that is true security, not a life without movement, but a heart that does not stir because it has made God its dwelling. Chapter 11. The disease of the fearful soul. Just as the body reflects the mind in shadow, the body is a messenger, a silent mirror that faithfully reflects the inner state of the soul. It has no will of its own, does not conspire against you, does not seek to punish you. It simply obeys. It obeys consciousness, sustained emotions, and the thoughts that are repeated day after day. And when the mind lives under the dominion of fear, the body inevitably becomes its field of manifestation. Fear is not just a fleeting thought, it is a vibrational energy that alters the entire system. It affects breathing, digestion, circulation, sleep, posture, and heartbeats. But more profoundly, it affects the relationship between the soul and the body, between the mind and the cell, between the spirit and form. When fear installs itself as a permanent guest, harmony is broken. And where there is no harmony, there is disorder. And where there is disorder, disease finds its door. There is no need to fear this. It is not condemnation, judgment, or divine punishment. It is a wake-up call, a signal from the soul saying, I am disconnected. I have forgotten the source. I need to return to the truth. The body shouts what the soul does not dare to say. The ailment is the language of what has been repressed, denied, or ignored. And many times that physical pain has its root in sustained fear. Fear of losing, fear of being hurt, fear of abandonment, fear of failure, fear of living, or fear of dying. A mind that lives in constant threat releases substances, activates systems, collapses functions, and all this, over time, manifests. Not because God wills it, but because that is how the law works. Form follows thought, matter obeys consciousness. Therefore, true healing does not begin with the body. It begins with the mind, with the soul, with deep thought, with reconnection to the eternal. And that is why the healing of fear is invisible medicine that the body recognizes when you begin to replace fear with faith, guilt with forgiveness, anguish with silence. The body responds not as magic but as a natural consequence. The body does not need to be forced to heal. It only needs the spiritual cause of disorder to be dissolved. And the cause many times is fear, and that fear only dissolves with light, with love, with truth. This does not deny the importance of medicine or physical care. God can work through these channels as well. But if the deep cause is not addressed, the symptom may disappear and then return because the ground where it germinated was not transformed. And that ground is the mind. The soul heals when it stops fearing, and the body follows that healing like a flower that reopens to the sun, not through effort but through alignment. Listen to your body, not to fear it, but to understand which part of you is asking to return home. Perhaps your back carries unexpressed worries. Perhaps your lungs contract from uncried anguish. Perhaps your stomach inflates from thoughts you haven't digested. Everything is a symbol. Everything is a message. Everything can be redeemed with love. Say in silence, my body, you are the temple of God, and I thank you for speaking to me, and I do not fear your signals. I listen to them with compassion, and now, with the help of the Spirit, I release every mental cause that has accepted fear. Fear will no longer be your food. Love will be your medicine, and love will be your atmosphere. And that prayer, spoken with sincerity, does not need to be repeated 1,000 times, because if it is true, it begins to create a new field. And in that field, the body stops defending itself and begins to rest. And where the body rests, life begins to flow again. Disease is not your enemy. It is your opportunity. It is the voice of the soul inviting you to look deeper. And when you accept that invitation, when you use that pain as a portal, when you allow fear to reveal its falsehood, true healing begins. From within, from the invisible, from the eternal. Chapter 12. Inner Silence. Peace as a shield against any threat. In the noise of the world, fear finds its nourishment. It feeds on the constant roar of uncontrolled thoughts, voices that offer opinions, news that alarms, demands that push, memories that scream, and futures that pressure. The soul, immersed in this stormy sea, loses contact with its center, its anchor, its true refuge. And that refuge is not found anywhere outside. It is found in silence. Inner silence is not simply about shutting the mouth or turning off the surroundings. It is about creating a closed space within you, a sanctuary where neither fear, nor doubt, nor worry can enter. A space that cannot be invaded because it has no doors or windows. It is pure presence, pure stillness, pure consciousness of God. Peace is not passivity. Peace is power at rest. It is the strength of the soul that has remembered its origin, the silent certainty of one who no longer needs to control because they have surrendered everything to the principle that governs life with perfect love. When you access this silence, not with the mind but with your whole being, a miracle occurs. Everything that seemed urgent becomes irrelevant. Everything that seemed threatening loses its form. Everything that troubled you begins to fade away. Because in inner silence, the false does not survive, and fear, being false, loses power before the unspoken truth but deeply felt. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is fullness without form. It is the voice of God without words. It is the wisdom that cannot be taught but that transforms. You were born with access to this silence, but you have forgotten it. Instead, you have filled your consciousness with noise, with judgments, with analysis, with comparisons, with constant alerts. And in that noise, fear builds its throne. But just one instant, yes, just one instant of true silence is enough for the soul to breathe. And when the soul breathes, fear departs, not because you have defeated it, but because you no longer need it. In that silence, peace is not something you create, it is something you remember. And once remembered, it surrounds you like a shield, not to isolate you from the world, but to allow you to inhabit it without losing your center. And that center is not reached through effort or complicated techniques. It is reached with integrity, with humility, with the sincere willingness to stop running, to stop fighting, to stop thinking so much, and simply be. Be with yourself, be with God, be with the truth. Fear is disordered movement. Peace is ordered presence, and silence is the door between them. When fear appears, do not react. Do not justify yourself, and do not flee, make silence. Close the body's eyes and open the eyes of the soul. Breathe consciously. Feel your existence without interpreting it. And say internally, here I am, God. I do not need to understand. I only need to remain in you. And remain, remain, remain. At first it will be difficult. The mind will want to return to the noise, but you, with patience and sweetness, return to silence again and again until silence finds you. And then you will know that you are not alone. You never were. You were just distracted. And in that deep knowing, without the need for explanations, you will feel that nothing external can touch you, because you are covered, you are held, you are within the invisible shield of peace. Peace is not defense, it is the presence of God. From that peace you act differently, you speak differently, you love differently, and you live from the truth, not from urgency. And fear, finding no echo, retreats because it no longer has a place to reflect. Silence is your refuge, but it is also your power. You do not need to understand it, you only need to inhabit it. And when you inhabit it, you will understand that nothing was as serious as it seemed, because the one who was afraid was not you, but a false idea of you. And in the silence, that idea dissolves, and only the real remains, the peace that you are, the peace that covers you, the peace that no fear can overcome. Chapter 13. How to deprogram the subconscious from inherited fear. Many of the fears that govern your life today were not consciously chosen. They were handed down to you. They were planted with words, gestures, silences, warnings, examples. You were not born with a fear of failure, of abandonment, of poverty, or of death. You were born free, but you learned to fear, and that learning was not always explicit. Many times it was silent, involuntary, disguised as protection or wisdom. Fear was inherited, and what is inherited can be deprogrammed. Your subconscious does not reason, it does not judge, it does not evaluate whether what it receives is true or false, useful or harmful. It simply records and repeats. And if for years you have been fed thoughts of insecurity, dense emotions, limiting beliefs, and tragic views of the world, it will act accordingly. Not because it wants to harm you, but because that is its programming. The soul that lives with deep fear often does not understand why. It knows it is safe, but it fears. It knows it has resources, but it is anxious. It knows that everything is fine, but it expects the worst. And the reason is not in its present, but in the unconscious files of its history. There are the decrees heard in childhood. Be careful, the world is dangerous. There is always something missing. Don't trust anyone. Money goes away. Life is harsh. There are the warning gestures, the defensive attitudes, the anxious reactions that shaped the emotional field from an early age. And all of that was recorded. And what is recorded repeats itself unless it is undone. Deprogramming the subconscious does not require struggle. It requires re-education, consistency, love, and light. because fear does not survive where there is clarity, and the subconscious begins to transform when the content it receives changes. The first step is to observe without judgment. Recognize which thoughts repeat themselves. Identify which emotions arise in certain situations. Understand that it is not your real self who fears, but an inherited programming that is operating automatically. And by observing it with compassion, you stop being a victim of it. You become the master of your consciousness. The second step is to introduce new spiritual information. It is not enough to eliminate the old. It must be replaced. And that new information must be elevated, coherent, repeated with love and faith. Not as a magic formula, but as a conscious affirmation. I am safe. I am guided, and God is my source. The past does not define my present. The truth sets me free. These affirmations, spoken with devotion and sustained with feeling, begin to open new channels within the soul. And what at first seems artificial or difficult eventually becomes the new inner voice. The third step is loving vigilance. The conditioned mind will tend to revert to the known. In those moments, you must not condemn yourself. Just remember and choose again and again until the new becomes natural, until the new voice is stronger than the old reflex. And finally, inner silence, because in silence the subconscious rises to the surface. And in that sacred space you can look at it, bless it, and surrender it. You do not need to understand everything. You only need to surrender it to God and declare that it no longer has power over you. Because the Spirit has been invited to occupy that place. And where does the Spirit dwell? The inherited fear can no longer hold on. The subconscious is like a garden, and you are the gardener. You cannot prevent bad seeds from being planted, but you can pull them out, and you can plant other seeds of peace, seeds of certainty, seeds of love. With each chosen thought, with each repeated affirmation, with each act of courage, you are rewriting your inner story. You are telling your soul, the past no longer decides for me. I choose from the truth, and the truth is that I am free. And that freedom is not theory. It is experience. It is rest. It is a new mind that no longer fears what was or what could be, because it has been healed from the root. And in that root there is no longer fear but God. Chapter 14. Visualization and prayer as weapons of light. You are not defenseless in the face of fear. You are not helpless against the shadows that assail you from within or without. The soul that has awakened to its divine origin does not need to run or hide. It possesses sacred tools, and these tools are not physical, violent, or aggressive. They are pure light, directed with intention, wisdom, and faith. Among all of them, two shine with celestial power: visualization and prayer. Visualization is not fantasy. It is not childish illusion or an escape from reality. It is the highest creative act of the conscious mind. It is to see with the eyes of the soul what has not yet taken form. It is to place images before the subconscious so that it acts according to them, like an architect obedient to the plan given. And when visualization is done with spiritual intention, from truth and not from empty desire, the image becomes a living seed, and that seed, sooner or later, will blossom. Fear creates images, images of loss, pain, chaos, separation, and these images, if sustained, condition your external world. But you can and must replace them with images of light, images of healing, order, harmony, and divine presence enveloping everything, and not only as a mental mechanism but as a sacred act, because what you see inwardly, if charged with emotion and faith, ends up reflecting outwardly. Imagine your life surrounded by peace. Visualize your body full of health. Visualize your paths open, your relationships harmonious, your provision assured. Visualize not from lack but from consciousness. This is already mine in the spiritual realm, and my mind claims it, honors it, and manifests it. Along with visualization is prayer, but not a prayer of fearful supplication, rather a scientific, affirmative prayer based on the certainty of being. A prayer that does not beg but declares, that does not doubt but recognizes, that does not seek to convince God but to align the mind with the will of good. True prayer does not ask for what has already been given. It gives thanks, affirms, recognizes, and opens itself to receive what already exists in the invisible. Because it is not about forcing the universe, but about opening the doors of the soul so that the eternal can flow. When you unite visualization and prayer, your consciousness becomes a beacon of light, an energetic field where fear is replaced and where the power of the Spirit begins to act without obstacles. Visualize with devotion. Pray with authority. Do it every day, not as an empty ritual, but as an exercise in alignment. Make your mind a temple, make your time an altar, and on that altar offer your purest thoughts, your highest images, your truest words. And the universe, which responds to vibration before form, will answer you. These are your weapons of light, not to attack but to illuminate, not to defend yourself but to remember your spiritual invulnerability, not to protect yourself from the world but to transform the world from within. When fear visits you, do not run. Close your eyes, breathe. Visualize the light enveloping you. Pray with inner voice. Nothing can touch me without passing through God, and God is love. Where there is love, fear does not enter. Stay there for 1 minute, 5, however long you need, until you feel something has changed. And it will have, because where the mind unites with the spirit, fear loses its reign, and light regains its throne. You are the bearer of that light. You are the channel of that presence, and now you know it. Now you can use it, and now fear no longer decides, because you have remembered your weapons, and they are from God. Chapter 15, The Fearless Consciousness, Living in the Certainty of Love That Never Fails. There is a state beyond the effort to be brave, beyond the struggle against anxiety, beyond even the constant work of replacing dark thoughts with affirmations of light. That state is not reached through inner violence, nor conquered with a single powerful prayer. It is the ripe fruit of an awakened consciousness and the greatest gift of the spiritual path. A mind free of fear because it has been bathed in the certainty of love that never fails. This consciousness is not built in a day. It is the consequence of returning many times to silence, of undoing inherited thoughts, of facing fear head-on and forgiving it, of affirming the truth again and again, until the truth stopped being an affirmation and became reality. The fear-free consciousness is not a mind devoid of emotions. It is a mind anchored in peace. It is a soul that no longer needs to understand everything to rest. It is a person who no longer runs from pain because they know that neither pain is eternal nor shadow is real. It is one who has surrendered their need for control and found that in surrender is the greatest strength. This consciousness lives from unity. It does not believe in separation. It does not identify with lack, danger, or threat. It has remembered its spiritual nature, and in remembering it, no longer fears the world because it knows that the external world is not the cause, but the reflection. When the inner world is governed by love, the outer world responds with harmony. Living without fear does not mean that dark thoughts will never appear. It means they no longer have power over you because you see them coming and let them pass. You no longer identify with them because you know you are not that. You are pure consciousness, a living expression of God, a channel through which eternal love flows. And this love cannot be hurt. It cannot be threatened. It cannot be taken away. The soul that lives in this certainty walks lightly, speaks with sweetness, acts with decision, but without hardness, loves without fear of loss, gives without fear of lack, and trusts life. Not because everything is perfect, but because it has known the love behind everything. This love is not emotion or ideal, but a living presence. The love that is God itself, and that has been with you every step of the way, even when you didn't feel it, even when you doubted, even when you feared. Because love does not fail, and what does not fail frees, and what frees illuminates. If you have walked through this book with an open heart, you will know that you are not finishing another chapter. You are entering a new way of living, a way of being without the old habits of fear, not because everything has been resolved outside, but because everything has been resolved inside. You no longer need to fear. You no longer need to defend yourself. You no longer need to guess the future or justify your past. You no longer need proof because you have known certainty. The certainty that you are loved, the certainty that you are guided, the certainty that good will never leave you. Live from there. Dwell in that space, and every time the world invites you to doubt, remember who you are, not with the mind, but with life, with every act, with every decision, with every word you choose to speak or not speak. And when the night comes and everything becomes silent, you will be able to rest, not because there are no problems, but because there is a greater truth than all of them. I live in God, and God lives in me, and this perfect love has cast out all fear forever. Thus ends fear, not with a battle, but with a luminous surrender. And thus begins your true life, a life free because the love that never fails has made its home in you, and you have made your home in it.